Coming up on This Week in Computer Hardware, Haswell, who? Broadwell is coming, people. Radeon GPUs just got cheap. Overclocking memory, a tablet with K1, die, optical drives, die, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 268, recorded May 22nd, 2014. Broadwell ship date? Kind of.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you a big ol' hopping dog pile of useful hardware information. Desktops, laptops, tablets, even the occasional smartphone story. We are there for you. And in case you're wondering who we is, I'm Patrick Norton, and I am joined, as always, by, well, when he's not traveling, the ever so awesome founder of PCPer.com, Mr. Ryan Shrout.
How are you doing? I like the new digs, even if they are temporary for you there.
Yes. If you hear a pounding on the door, I'm just going to ignore it.
Okay. It's not the police. Whatever it is, as long as it's not the police, we're probably fine.
Just an angry coworker. That's all. Well, it's funny. Can we talk about the thing we were talking about involving fiber before the show?
We can. Yeah, sure.
I understand you are going to be testing gigabit fiber in the PCPer offices in the near future.
Yeah, so Cincinnati Bell. So I live in northern Kentucky. It's a suburb of Cincinnati, and they announced a few months ago that they were going to start implementing gigabit fiber for some of their business customers in late summer. And I convinced them, based on all of the capability I have for evaluating technology and the experience I have evaluating technology, that I should be somebody to test it out. So I think they're going to do 4 pilots. So there's going to be 4 offices throughout the Cincinnati area that will have it, and we are going to be one. So that's right now. Like when I talked to them, they said it's going to be 1,000 down. The upstream it could be 500. It might be 450, depending on where their labs kind of stuck at, stability wise. So
this is unacceptable.
1,000 by 500 internet connections. So, and Skype will still not work sometimes, and we will wonder why.
It won't help Skype at all.
Yeah,
that's the best part.
I'll host way more nodes for Skype is probably what will happen with my new internet connection.
Oh my goodness. And all the LAN parties. You will be the LAN party center of Kentucky.
I literally, so like they came by and they met, and we talked about it, and I was trying to figure out like what do I do with that bandwidth?
Can I colo a backup server in your office?
Yes. It's like I was like I could host the site, like all of my websites from that, but it's like you got power outages and other issues you have to concern yourself with. But bandwidth wouldn't be an issue. Host like a Dropbox style server for everybody on the team here, right? Where
that'd be awesome. Or just like set up a BitTorrent sync server or a big massive crash plan box, like a. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I have so much plan. I have so many plans for your new bandwidth.
Hey, good. I'll need some ideas to help experiment with it, so that'll work.
This is going to be exciting. We'll start with Raspberry Pis and work our way up to like dual Xeon, crazy freaking server operating boards, server system boards, server boards. I'm so going to enjoy having these braces off my teeth. I can't decide if I really, really love the InWin 901 Mini-ITX aluminum and glass case, or if it feels ever so 80s. What was your take on it? Who wrote this up for PCPer?
This is Sebastian Peak, relatively new guy on the team, but doing a really good job with his write-up so far. I like the look of it. So the face of it, the top of it, have like a brushed aluminum finish, and then both sides, the back of your components and the front of your components, if you're looking at it as a normal case, are like tempered glass. Somewhat, I think, a little bit like smoke tinted as well, but minorly so.
Got a very 80s high-end stereo equipment vibe, but I gotta say, I hadn't seen the back of the case until a second ago, and then I realized it's like a machined aluminum back on this. And suddenly I realized that it's basically a massive aluminum hoop inside which you insert all of your components. And that I'm kind of into.
It's got some really interesting design cues. It'll fit most full-size power supplies, don't try to put an AX1200 in there. It'll be too long. But he put like a Corsair 750 in it. The way the water coolers mount, you can mount them internally or externally if you have like a 120. And if you have a 240, it wouldn't fit inside it. This is a Mini-ITX chassis. It won't fit inside. But if you go to, I think, the third page of the review, you'll see like they have an opening for you to feed part of that cooler up and over. And so you can actually have a 240 millimeter radiator mounted to the case, but it's like external on the back, right? Which is an interesting way of doing it. And you can mount any radiator you want out there as well, but it has room on the inside for a 120 with a fan.
What's the crazy glove box storage space area at the front bottom of the case where there's no glass? What's going on there?
Which part? The if you're seeing it without glass, it's probably you're talking about with the side doors on.
Yeah, it looks like there's a cutaway in the side of the case.
Oh,
if you go back to the
I think that's
below the InWin logo,
like power supply exhaust.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right,
yeah, if you look at
no. I see what you're talking about.
page.
Yeah, okay. I think that's just for style because it's got the USB 3 above it with the audio connections and that kind of thing.
I thought maybe there was like a storage rack in there or, a cup holder.
No, a cup holder's everything on top, like all computer cases. It's just
there it is. There's the secret slot.
It's interesting. Maybe
make an obligatory Jay and Silent Bob secret stash joke now.
Got hamsters or something that can live in there. I don't know. Hey.
You can run the habit trail tube through it.
Anything you want, you can.
The cooling looked pretty good on the system and the setup.
Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I mean, keep in mind, again, it's a Mini-ITX case. So you're limited to like one full-size graphics card, but it can fit a fairly long graphics card. I think 12, I think we came up with like 11.5 inches was the measurement supported. The hard drive and SSD trays are pretty creatively designed. It's a pretty nice case. It's a little bit expensive, $180, $190, I think, is what it's currently selling for.
The materials look nice. I mean, they look heavy. They look dense. They don't look chintzy.
Yeah. I have never used it myself personally, but that's what it looks like, and I think that was his experience as well. And it looked through the review with like the pictures, and a lot of times we just say like most cases, if you buy an ATX case, most of the time it's going to look very similar to other ATX cases. This is a very unique option, right? And it's unique how you build it. It's unique on where the components go and what the look and style is. It's definitely worth, if you're interested in a Mini-ITX style design, it's definitely worth taking a look at, even though it is a bit pricey at $189 right now. It's on Newegg. On Newegg for $179, so pretty close. Yep,
pretty cool. PC Per Gold Award, always a coveted item. Speaking of coveted items, Maury wrote up the MSI Z97 Gaming motherboard review. I will say the aesthetic on this motherboard is a little towards the Ferrari for my taste. There's a dragon there's sort of a prancing dragon instead of a prancing horse. A lot of red elements, but this seems like, and we should also point out, as you're looking at this motherboard, remember, this is the first of 74 motherboard reviews that'll be going up on PC Per over the next month. Ryan has dedicated himself to charity to review every single new Z97 motherboard coming out from the major manufacturers, which I think the total is at 74 so far.
Honestly, it's probably higher than that.
That's kind of frightening.
If you include, you got MSI, Asus, Gigabit, ASRock, all those guys.
There's probably like 125 at this point.
Probably, yeah. And I will definitely, absolutely not review and look at every single one of those because no thanks. But
this is a pretty badass motherboard. Teasing aside, I mean, there is an incredible array of ports on this beast. And I like a motherboard with ports. It looks like, is that 316 by PCI Express? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
It's 3 physical by 16, but it's only by 8 by 8 by 4.
Okay. Weird.
So keep that. And the last one is really through the chipset, so it doesn't have the same speed and capability as the ones going through the the CPU itself. So really, just 2A and 3 or 2A SLI and Crossfire is probably as far as you'd go with that, though.
Okay. which is more than enough for most people.
Oh yeah.
How did Maury feel about the overclocking features on the MSI board?
It's pretty good. You know, it's interesting with the Z97 release because there were only a handful of things that really changed from the Z87 chipset to the Z97 chipset. One is kind of official support for SATA Express and M.2 interfaces. But we saw an Asus motherboard that was based on Z87 at CES that had SATA Express, and it was able to do that. So a lot of what we're seeing in these motherboards is not really changed, right? So the overclocking capability is going to be very similar to the Z87 performance, Z87 parts, and a lot of the boards, you know, even from vendor to vendor, Asus to MSI to Gigabit, are going to perform very similar in terms of overclocking because a lot of it with Haswell, with that generation of processors, moved things like the voltage regulation onto the chip itself as opposed to on the motherboard. So one of those differentiating points was kind of removed from them. So they're looking at other things, right? They're improving their audio. If you look at their audio boost technology, you can see if you look up at towards the left-hand side of the motherboard, if you were looking at it in your standard fashion, you'll see the audio now has different kind of capacitors in that. If you look up there in that picture in the upper left-hand corner there you go. They have, you know, audio grade capacitors. So they're not super ferrite solid caps or anything like that. They're audio caps, right? So they're very analog. They're meant to do that. And if you see, there's a line on the PCB that designates, you know, where they have separated the layers of the PCB where the audio is going from the controller and codec to the outputs themselves in an attempt to lower the amount of potential for noise and interference from other electrical components on the motherboard, right? So these are the types of things that these motherboard vendors are doing. MSI, in this particular case as well, has done it. So they have a lot of interesting features on there. This is their gaming, the Gaming 7 board, right? So it's one of their higher end in their gaming series of boards. A lot of interesting features there. 8 USB 3.0 ports on the back.
I always loved like eight SATA 6 gig connectors, 8 USB ports, and additional, you know, the support for another 4 USB 2.0 ports and 2 USB 3.0 ports on the motherboard, 10 gigabit per second Ethernet. In case the 8 3.0 USB ports aren't enough, there's another 2 USB 2.0 ports. You know, there's a regular, you know, RJ45 jack on the back, HDMI, 2 HDMI jacks, 1 display port, although I think even Broadwell's graphics performance will not justify that many display ports on the back.
Right. The only thing that this board is missing in my book is SATA Express. And it's kind of a, do you really think it's an important feature or not type of thing? A lot of the boards that we've seen so far with Z97 have 1 or 2 SATA Express slots or ports, I guess I would call it. And if you know what those are, a SATA Express port is really built out of 2 standard SATA ports and then a third connector that is actually used for the PCI Express communications. If you don't use SATA Express, which nobody is using SATA Express today because there aren't any devices available that support SATA Express, you can just use those 2 integrated SATA ports as standard SATA ports, which is nice. So this particular motherboard doesn't have SATA Express. And that's, I think, compared to other Z97 boards in this price segment, is something that's missing. But if you're never going to use it,
it's no big deal.
It's no big deal, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's kind of.
I'd rather have Thunderbolt.
Yeah, and you know what? I think I've only seen one motherboard with Z97 that has Thunderbolt support in it, like built in. Like there's a Gigabit board that had Thunderbolt. All of the Asus boards have support for Thunderbolt if you buy that add-in Thunderbolt EX2 adapter. But I haven't really seen much about Thunderbolt, which is a little bit worrisome if you're a fan of that connectivity option.
It's just I happen to have, you know, so many Apple devices and a couple of hard drive adapters, and you know, there's moments where I enjoy Thunderbolt more than I enjoy USB 3.0. And then I look at the price of Thunderbolt cables, and that feeling just goes away, even now. Creative Lab announces Sound Blaster E1 and E3. I thought this was kind of interesting. Scott wrote this up for the website. It's pretty funny, right? So this is a product category that has existed for a long time in the audiophile community, and having Sound Blaster do it's kind of interesting. They're headphone amplifiers, you know, and the idea is for super high-end headphones, not necessarily like the ones I'm holding, but for heavy-duty professional ones that run over 250 ohms. A headphone amplifier can do amazing things to sort of clean up or clear up, especially the low end, the overall audio quality. So these are portable, and the idea is basically you would run your output from your phone or your iPod or other audio device into the Sound Blaster E1 or E3, and then run the output from that into your headphones. But they can also be used as external audio adapters. You know, they're claiming like 106 dB sound signal to noise ratio on the E1, 110 decibels on the E3. So they're basically like USB sound cards. And then the E3 goes off on a tangent, right, Scott? Its USB hookup can attach not just to PCs and Macs, but Android and iOS mobile devices, while it also has Bluetooth for iOS 5 and Android 3.1 and higher. It can be used as a wired external sound card over USB on Android 4.2, using USB streaming over Android Open Accessory Protocol 2.0, say that 3 times fast, and iOS 7 Plus using a Lightning USB adapter. And this is where we get into this sort of crazy audiophile territory where the idea is like, hey, can I do better than the, well, okay, you're going to need an iPhone 5C or 5S, but can I do better than the audio inside of my phone? The answer is pretty much yes, and audiophiles have been playing with this for a while. So with the E3, you can run an adapter from your phone to this external DAC, have the DAC do the audio processing, and amplify it for your headphones to get a superior audio experience if you don't mind carrying around, you know, a box along with your phone. It's a pretty small box, but it's another box and more batteries to carry. E1, $69. It's pretty typical for a headphone amplifier. The E3 will follow, quote, soon for $169. You know, if this sounds interesting to you, there's products from FIO and about 3,000 other companies out there that do various elements of this. FIO being a particularly affordable brand. Chumoy headphone amplifiers are something you can build if you're into projects. But this is kind of an interesting next step as you move up from, you know, earbuds, low-end earbuds to high-end earbuds or high-end headphones. A next place to experiment with audio is getting a better DAC. I will say right now my favorite is still the Dragonfly from AudioQuest, which sells for $100 if you do the 1.0 or $150 for the 1.2. And I could start listing dozens of more options, but I don't want to put anybody to sleep just yet. But it's nice to see Creative Labs kind of continue to move the audio world forward. So cool. I get excited about audio.
I thought you would like that product. I was like, if somebody was going to be interested in headphone amp for a cell phone that I know, it would probably have been Patrick. Yeah,
I'm that man. Xiaomi, the MiPad, is that the right name for that? Tegra K1 powered.
I think that is correct. I think you got that pronunciation correct. Good for you, because I did not in my first attempt.
Scott wrote this up. Is this the first Tegra K1 powered device we've seen outside of NVIDIA demos?
Yeah, it is. NVIDIA announced it on their blog. This company announced it as well. It's a tablet. It's I believe it's an 8-inch tablet. Yeah, 2048 by 1536 screen, right? It's pretty good resolution for an 8-inch screen for sure. Right. It's going to be available in China. This is not like a US product, of course. Right. Starting at $240 for 16 gig model and going up to $270 for the 64 gig model. Obviously, you go for the 64 gig model then. 2 gigs of memory, 8 megapixel rear facing, 5 megapixel front facing cameras. And this is the first to use the Tegra K1 SoC, which has a GPU performance, you know, spec'd out at a little bit faster than a GeForce 9600 GT, while supporting OpenGL 4.4, DirectX 11, DirectX 12, GPU compute languages. You know, this part was announced. The SoC rather was announced at CES, and this is the first part we've actually seen announced with it. And we haven't seen anything in the US yet, and I haven't really gotten my hands on any individual products either. I mean, right. I've put out a couple of requests for people to try to see if I can get a hold of one of these particular devices, because as the first thing out there, it will covet some amount of attention, even if you can't buy it here, just as a data point, as a proof point for the technology. But Eager to see what else. Maybe at Computex we see some other announcements. Maybe somebody like Asus or, you know, maybe they announce like a Shield 2 or something along those lines at Computex. But considering we're 2 weeks from that show and I really haven't heard any rumblings of anything like that, I kind of doubt it. So eager to see what they can come up with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see also what the battery life is going to be like and what the build quality will be like.
That's the most important thing that we have no idea about, right? Performance can be great, but if on a mobile device, if battery life sucks, that sucks.
20 glorious minutes of, amazing gaming. AMD Radeon R9 prices have leveled out, and the R9 280 has dropped to a delightful $249. This just makes me happy. I don't know how happy it makes AMD, but you know, 290 Radeon R9 290X, 550 at Amazon, 529 at Newegg. The 295 X2, the monster card of joy, that's like $1,500.
Yeah.
290s are down to like $379 on Amazon. That's awesome. No.
Yeah, no, it is. So this is all good news, right? So the prices of the R9 series of cards, 290s, 280s, 270s are back where they should have been the whole time. It took a while to get here for sure. And, you know, they've figured out availability. So either, you know, they've increased production. They've probably did do some of that. The Bitcoin, the Litecoin, the altcoin mining craze kind of has died down quite a bit. That helps. It helps gamers. It doesn't really help AMD. But remember, when the prices were high, AMD wasn't really benefiting from it. They were benefiting from selling through all they could make, but they weren't making additional profit off of each part sold. Just the reseller really was making the additional profit. So Amazon and Newegg loved it. Everybody else, maybe not so much, right? They weren't really getting any of that. What was interesting was somebody else passed me a link that if you look in that story, just above the never settle forever image, there's a link for used Radeon hardware that goes to an eBay page. It's an eBay search page. And it's changing every day. But you can buy the R9 290X, which is listed in that table as $549 for significantly lower amounts, right? So like on the first page, I'm looking at a buy it now for $300. There's one with 5 hours left for $247. Those are scarily low prices, if you ask me. If you look at completed auctions, you know, something that completed just 4 minutes ago, one sold for $315, one sold for $300, $350, $370. So these $315. So these, especially like the first generation of 290X, is the ones that had the reference coolers. The ones I think were bought up for all of the custom, you know, coin mining craze. It seems to me at this point that they're starting to be put back into circulation for the rest of us, which is potentially good news for gamers. We were asked last night on our podcast, like, what are you fearful of buying a card that has been Litecoin mining since it was installed, right? Since that card was released. And there has to be some wear and tear, you know, like I'm not worried about the silicon. You're more worried about things like capacitors, right? What has happened to them over the last 3 months of usage time? But if you can get it for $300, maybe you're willing to take that risk, right? Now you're talking about $250 lower than the retail price of some of those R9 290X cards that are new for sale. And this is what I worry about. How much is this affecting AMD sales, right? Actually, last night when we looked at this, there were, I think, 700 and something results for the R9 290X, and now I show like 1,370. So maybe that's not great. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, do you think that a glut of R9 290Xs to kind of find their way back into the market through eBay and Craigslist and forums that are just selling it, is that affecting this market? Will it affect this market?
Yeah, I think on one hand it's going to affect the market. On the other hand, a lot of people, even at that kind of ridiculous discount, I think a lot of people are going to be concerned about buying a used car. I mean, it's a used card. It's funny, right? Because these cards have essentially, you know, have been doing maybe the one thing that's possibly worse than splitting proteins. You know, they've been running at 100% for weeks and months. And, you know, our rule of thumb is generally if it doesn't blow in the first 72 hours, it's probably not going to blow for the next few years. But you can also say that running, you know, electronics at 100% in a hot environment, probably without enough airflow, you know, is never really good for them. You know, I think AMD must be freaking out right now. You know, because they were, you know, they had all these people irritated because of the cost of the cards for several months, and now that glut of cards is showing up super cheap, and they're not going to see any money from them. I think it's going to be, you know, I think it's a good summer if you're willing to take a risk and get lucky with a GPU. I wouldn't want to be AMD going into this summer, because those are fat deals on nice cards.
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard to, even though those are using reference coolers and they're not good coolers and they're loud and they can have variable clock speeds, like $300 for an R9 290X is a steal. It's a great performance card for that price value, right? And you can probably even buy an aftermarket cooler setup for $40 or $50 maybe, and upgrade it that way. Maybe you exceed the lifespan that you would otherwise and get a more quiet and more stable gaming setup too.
I like stable gaming.
Yeah, I think most of us do.
Not so stable Twitch. Apparently YouTube's going to buy Twitch. The reports are that the deal is essentially done, that Google's going to buy Twitch to merge it into YouTube for $1 billion. Scott seemed very upset about this. What does our audience think? Can any good come from this? You know,
I don't know. I don't know if do you use Twitch for anything? Do you watch Twitch for anything?
My gaming is of such a mediocre quality. The last thing I want to do is share it with the entire internet.
I can appreciate that. And usually when I stream my gaming out on Twitch, I'm usually embarrassed about what is happening as well. But it's funny. I was talking with somebody. I was at an event in San Francisco on Monday. I was in San Francisco for 18 total hours, and this kind of news came up, and we were talking about, well, a lot of these gamers that are streaming, you know, they have music playing in the background, and Twitch doesn't really police that in any kind of way. And we all know that YouTube and Google absolutely police, and they allow other entities to police what is going on YouTube. So I think that would be a dramatic shift.
Part of like YouTube essentially has an ASCAP BMI license situation where they deal with the musical issues or the music in the background issues, where they do, you know, if you were running copyrighted material from insert name of, you know, NFL, MLB, Paramount, Time Warner, you know, Viacom, I could list, you know, copyright holders for several days. If that's the stuff that usually gets pulled down off of YouTube. And, you know, it's tough, right? Because, you know, I don't really see Twitch as being an inexpensive business to run, given the volume of video and storage they're probably consuming. You know, Twitch certainly doesn't have the kind of, you know, sales team or ad team that YouTube does. And YouTube has a pretty monster team, and they're still struggling with revenue. So, you know, if you like Twitch, I think it being bought by Google may be good for it still being around. But a lot of stuff bought by Google has maybe not been so around a couple of years after, or at least not in the form it was.
Yeah, maybe the track record's not the best now.
You know, I'm not sure anybody's track record is the best at this point. Which brings us to our next story. Jeremy Hellstrom wrote this up for PC Per. Is the third time the charm for the Surface Pro? Iterate, iterate, iterate. That's what you hear, like, you know, product managers that are on fast schedules or software developers. And this is a hard line. Quote, Microsoft is continuing its so far ill-advised attempt at selling hardware with the release of the Surface Pro 3. Windows 8.1, so it's not going to have the RT issues. So, but I think we're talking about an $800 MSRP.
Yep. Starting at,
so, yeah, Core i7 Haswell processor, which should mean great battery life, 12-inch 2160 by 1440 display, which I'm not a huge fan of the 3:2 aspect ratio. But Microsoft points out it offers 6% more viewable content, so you can have all the Metro joy that you've been looking for in life. Optional docking station, you can output to a 4K display because, hey, there's nothing quite like Metro on a 4K display. Actually, I will say Metro looks really cool on a 4K display. Tech Report had the write-up that Jeremy was drawing off of. It's funny, we've been getting a bunch of people asking, like, is this going to be it? And I will say, having watched Microsoft, pardon me, I'm sliding off this strange pleather couch I'm on. I remember there was, Internet Explorer 1.0, everybody made fun of it. Internet Explorer 2.0, everybody made fun of it. Internet Explorer 3 basically destroyed every other browser in the industry. So there's a running joke about Microsoft is that, 3.0 is when Microsoft actually gets it right. So who knows? The Surface 3.0, maybe the tablet that finally, makes the Surface something to take names and kick ass. I mean, I still think it's kind of amazing and kind of insane for Microsoft to sort of look at all of its partners and be like, none of you can build a tablet properly. We're going to build the perfect Windows tablets. And, it's like, wait, aren't you depending on all these other people to buy your operating system and move the platform forward? And all of a sudden, some of Microsoft's most loyal customers over the years, if not decades, are now suddenly, hey, look at Android. Hey, look, I can do some more Linux systems again. So, it sounds interesting. The specs are interesting. I'd like to see Broadwell over Haswell, given that Broadwell is supposed to be like another 30% in terms of power handling or reduction over Haswell. I'm just, I think the Surface 1 was one of the great bloodbaths in hardware write-off history. Like, what did they write off? $9 million in unsold tablets.
It's a lot.
That makes Logitech's problem with the Google TV seem kind of minor. But this is also Microsoft. They have billions upon billions, they have hundreds of billions of dollars squirreled away to play with. While we're talking about playing with things, interesting odd report came out on Reuters this weekend. We were talking about this on Techzilla earlier this week, where a Reuters reporter apparently ran into, is it Krasnich?
Krasanich.
Intel CEO. Krasanich. Thank you.
Krasanich. There's not very many vowels in that name.
No, and I'm pretty used to the complicated. I played rugby with a guy named Tazinski, which had like a vowel. Yep. But so Reuters got to talk with Intel CEO Brian Krasinski and Krasanich. Yeah. Krasanich. I apologize, Mr. Krasanich. But it was an interesting story and a strange place for it to come out of, because he basically said they're promising Broadwell architecture, 14-nanometer process technology on store shelves in time for the holidays. On one hand, it's cool. This is great. I'm excited about Broadwell, like a 40% boost in onboard graphics performance. There's going to be some good stuff with unlocked cores. 14 nanometers is what's bringing us kind of the performance boost and the power handling boost. And did you just tell the entire world that your new processor is going to be around for the holiday shopping season, several months after the back to school shopping season that is still 3 months away? Or am I just overreacting to this? I mean, because I'm already like, I'm going to wait 6 months before I get a new processor or a new laptop or a new notebook.
I think this was kind of what we expected to see. But all the kind of forecasting they had ever given publicly or officially before was that second half of 2014. Right. So some people were probably like you were hopeful for earlier. Some of us like me were fearful for last day of the year type of thing.
When I start looking optimistic, it's a really frightening thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, no kidding. But it's really, it looks like it's something in between, right? Like it's and he doesn't really say specifically. He says before holiday, but not just before the holiday, which puts it to October, November to me, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah, That reeks beginning. That smells like the beginning of November to me.
Yeah. And I mean,
know,
it kind of makes sense though, because you got to think Haswell refresh is just now coming out. We know about Devil's Canyon, which is a Haswell refresh part that has an updated kind of thermal interface. It's supposed to be a little bit better for overclockers, and that's going to be after the Haswell refresh. So I'd expect that in June, probably, I guess. And so, they wouldn't, step on that right away within the first 60 days of those processor releases. And also worth noting is when he talked about Broadwell CPUs being on store shelves, in systems, he doesn't talk about if they're talking about tablets or notebooks or desktops or like socketed, parts that you can actually put in a DIY system. I'm going to guess like notebooks only would be my my first guess, but I think if you're looking for an upgrade path, that's going to be a little bit further down the pipeline, probably in 2015.
I wait with bated breath. And it's probably fair. I mean, the Z97 just came out. Haswell's just picking up speed. But, it's a problem with looking at this stuff as far out as you do, and then I get along for the ride. Suddenly I'm thinking, I just want to wait one more iteration, just one more iteration, and then it will be time.
This time for really. Yeah.
This time for reals. Like I'm going to drop the temperature in my server closet 40 degrees when I finally get off that Core i7. Core i7 920. Twitch at twit.tv is the email address. We love to hear from you. At Ryan Stroud, at Patrick Norton, if you want to tweet us individually. And we get an email from Chris who says, I'm a longtime listener writing in for the first time with a question that's been bugging me for a long time. Why did you wait so long, Chris? Back when RAM was cheap, well, cheaper than it is now, I went ahead and purchased 16 gigs, 4x4 gigabytes of Kingston HyperX Blue Genesis, which I thought were DDR3 1600 RAM. Turns out the Kingston advertises a lot of the RAM as DDR3 1600 when it only achieves those speeds if XMP is enabled in the BIOS. The default timing for the RAM otherwise is DDR 1333. Now, I doubt I'll ever notice a difference. This is true. But I've always wondered whether or not it would be a bad idea to enable XMP in the BIOS to get the full speed of the RAM. Since the memory controller is part of the Sandy Bridge and up CPUs on the Intel side, currently running an i5 2500K, moving to an i5 4670K soon, I've been wary of doing so since the XMP setting for these RAM modules ups the voltage to 1.65 volts for the RAM. So would I be doing any long-term damage to my CPU by using XMP? The modules are stable at either stock or XMP since I did test it with XMP for 8 hours using HCL MEMTest and it passed just fine. Thanks for all the tips and information you guys are giving out and look forward to the next show.
XMP stands for Extended Memory Profiles.
Okay.
And it's actually an Intel standard that is like a partnership with JEDEC and a partnership, JEDEC, which is like the memory standards company, and then all the motherboard vendors and they all kind of work together on this. It is 100% safe to enable XMP 99.99% of the time, right? Because that all XMP does. So back in the day, before you had things like profiles, SLI memory profiles, and then XMP memory profiles, you would buy memory that was rated at a certain speed, at a certain cast latency, with some other timings in there that we won't need to get into the detail of. And you would have to set those manually. And sometimes that would be finicky, and sometimes you would maybe try to go a little bit further up or clock them down to lower the cast latency or do this other stuff. What the profiles do is they say, hey, as a memory vendor, we have validated this memory to run at this speed, at this voltage, with these timings. And if your motherboard supports it, which obviously it does if it's recognizing the profile and you were able to run it stable for 8 hours, there's no problem at all. Is there a big performance upgrade from 1333 to 1600 megahertz memory?
No.
Not really. But that 1.65 memory voltage to the increase to the memory that's not for the whole processor. That's just for the memory controller portion of the processor, or actually to the memory modules themselves. So
I was going to say the memory themselves.
Yeah, don't worry about that. That's not killing your CPU.
No, that's a long way from. I mean, it's frustrating, right? Because XMP is essentially special overclocking for memory, right? So it's frustrating when you buy something and you pop it in and it's 1333 and you thought 1666 on the package. you know, and Ryan and I have said this before, like memory overclocking, it's just get over it, right? Like, you know, you're not going to notice a performance difference. You're barely going to be able to benchmark a performance difference. But, you know, I just want to amplify what Ryan said. The voltage on the memory is far, far away from your CPU, and your RAM should definitely handle that. If you have any like really serious concerns, you know, you can buy, there's delightful little clip-on aluminum devices that are designed to help, you know, get the heat, you know, basically heat sinks for your RAM sticks. You can make sure that there's air flowing over the RAM. You can throw an extra 120 millimeter biscuit fan in there. You know, because a lot of dealing with higher voltages is just making sure the heat is dissipated. And if you've got good airflow inside of your case, it shouldn't be a problem. And, you know, if the RAM is certified for that, you should be good. That said, nobody wants to blow out 16 gigabytes of memory if they don't have to.
No,
you know,
sure.
And if you're happy with it, don't fix it. See, sorry, I was getting a little curmudgeon on there for you, Ryan.
Yeah, a little bit, just a little bit.
Scott says, I want to get a new 27-inch display for my computer, but I want to know when the new displays usually come out. I would hate to buy a display next month. All the new displays come out. What time of year is the best for buying monitors? If you're saying HD TVs, I would say there's a staggered process where we see, you know, some initial information at CEDIA and then a big flood of announcements at CES, and then about 3 to 4 months, you know, but let's call it 3 months after CES, the 2014 models start hitting, often usually with the high-end models. You can tell when those are coming because basically the pipeline gets empty, and all of a sudden $1,500 HD TVs that had gone from like $2,500 down to $1,500 suddenly go back up to $2,000 because there's a dearth of TVs to sell, so they can charge more for them. And then not soon after that, the next year's model comes out, and then they kind of stagger the new models over the next few months. In my opinion, there is no bad time to buy a good monitor. There's no bad time to buy a monitor. There's no good time to buy a monitor. And if you can, go over to the Dell outlet and see what they have in stock. Like, I've become more of a fan of refurbished monitors. I don't think I've bought a new, well, no, I take it back. I bought a couple Samsung monitors new, but I bought so many refurbished monitors from Dell. And, you know, I think we've seen all the sort of, you know, Dell and Samsung announcements we're going to see. You're looking at the new 4K monitor. There's a new 4K monitor there's like 2 new 4K monitors from Dell. You know, monitors are something where they kind of release it and then it stays stable for a long time. There's not a lot of motivation to upgrade them until there's new glass technology or a new resolution gets popular. You know, that said, man, I just wish, you know, there's you know, there's not, you know, you've got the Cat Leap, you've got the monoprice, you've got a little bit of a jump to the QHD monitors from some other vendors. I don't think there's much going on in monitors right now other than the new lower cost 4K monitors.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing right now. G-Sync we thought was going to be a big thing, but really hasn't materialized in the last several months. We talked about adaptive sync being a thing that would happen for monitors, but that's not going to be until really the very, very, very end of this year, maybe even early 2015. But you're right. There's no cycle to monitors like there are with TVs or cars or something. It's kind of as technology warrants, they seem to get updated.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't hesitate to buy a monitor today and feel like you're going to miss something extraordinarily magnificent for the next 6 months to a year at the very least. So
I will say though that, you know, there's a 1 in 3 chance that as soon as you buy that monitor, you will look at the internet and the newest, most amazing monitor will show up at the price point you purchased, or for a few dollars more, or just to spite you, the universe will have it show up for a few dollars less than you paid for your new monitor. We used to call that the Laporte effect.
Yep.
But you know, I fear that much less in monitors than I do with just about any other consumer electronics device on the planet. So should we do one more question before we go?
Yeah, sure.
Because this one's from Donovan and it's for Ryan. It says, Ryan said in the show he would like optical drives to go away. I'm curious how he installs an operating system without an optical drive.
USB.
Well, Yeah, I was going to say, USB thumb drive, optical drives attached over USB. You can do it over Ethernet if you are a networking wizard in certain cases. Primarily, though, most of the Windows 8, Windows 7, most forms of Linux these days, all are able to install over a USB thumb drive. I think my last OS X install was over the network, over the internet, which is kind of a mind-blowing experience when you basically, use your BIOS to install an operating system. I'm a fan of Blu-rays. Ryan is a fan of making optical drives. Die.
And not only is it, I don't have to have an optical drive. Installing an operating system over USB is significantly faster than installing it over DVD as well. In most places, like even when it took longer than it should have. You had to hack in Windows installers through USB for a while, but now you can download an official Microsoft Windows tool that will let you take an ISO download and convert it to a USB installer, like relatively easy. They're much less concerned about the installation medium and more concerned about the installation code that you are using during the process.
Which I think is exactly the right attitude to take.
Yeah.
It was because, and I will also say, as much as I love Blu-rays for movies and ripping audio straight off of a CD, installing your operating system off of a USB 3.0 device or a USB 2.0 device is just awesome. I think I've installed it off a USB 3.0 device. Definitely USB. I mean, even a USB 2.0 thumb drive just kicks the snot
way faster. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's okay, Donovan. You can keep a nice optical drive in an external enclosure and use that to rip your Blu-rays and store them on your server. Just tell the movie companies I said it was okay.
All right, sounds good.
What's going up on PC Per this week, man?
Oh man, I would say on Tuesday we're gonna have a different low-cost 4K monitor to talk about. That I think is actually quite a bit better than the Samsung one. Not visually, but everything except the panel is much better, stand and all that kind of stuff. Probably won't take up a lot of
everybody watch his face. Is it from
diagnosis.
Texas?
Is it from
Did
Texas?
It come from Texas?
No, it didn't actually.
Okay.
Actually, it shipped from. It shipped from Taiwan. So go figure. It could be from anybody now. And what else is going on? Z97 is still a thing, and it won't be long until we have processors. Computex is just around the corner, and there's going to be a ton. We've been briefed on a ton of stuff that's going to be launched at the beginning of Computex. So PC Perspective's homepage will be busy.
Exciting. Oh my goodness. We built an emergency power supply, an emergency external battery out of a car battery on Dytron this week. That was really fun. It's much more portable than the one I did. I have a big old 125-pound 8D deep cycle battery I have in my garage, which is kind of the ultimate. I need to keep my laptop running for 12 hours despite the fact that the electrical has gone down or the electricity is out. It will charge your cell phone for several months. And then Techzilla, we pre-recorded an episode for Memorial Day. And we actually had Steve Gibson from SpinRite on talking to Shannon about the joys and excitement of running SpinRite to maintain your drive. And we just had an episode that went up. I got to talk with Alan Henry from Lifehacker. If you've ever seen Rainmeter and these incredible custom desktops on Windows where they integrate, like, you could have sort of like, drive capacity monitor, CPU temperature, all these really cool gauges that are embedded into the desktop of your system, and lots of other cool features. It's something I've always wanted to do, but been frustrated by. Alan does a walkthrough on that, and then also doing them on OS X and Linux, which was really fun for me. That is a really serious desktop right there. That is unhinged. That's techzilla.com, TEKZILLA or DIYTRYIN.com. Mr. Ryan Shrout is always to be found at PCPer.com. And I will say the PC Per Leaderboard is a wonderful place to go if you are looking for a new system build and don't want to deal with figuring out the correct arrangements of parts to make your life more happy. And I will also say that we are both obsessed and disappointed with 4K gaming. It's
fair.
It's
fair.
So close. It's so early. It's so funny. I would say if it runs in 4K, it looks incredible if you have the GPU to throw at it. But a lot of games, I can't wait for the Titanfall 4K patch. That's all I'm going to say. Yes, Titanfall 4K. Going to be awesome. Got to get a 4K monitor. Wife's going to kill me. And on that bright and cheerful note, I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.